district, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offer's the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man. Y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be trading. And I always be trading. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
What is up, Fantasyland? We're back in the district. Welcome back if you've been following as a GOAT. And if you're new, we welcome you to the channel. As we do it every week, guys, another monster show tonight, kicking off June. If you haven't checked out the Twitters out there for our soon-to-be guest list in the next week or two, go check that out at GOAT District, at the OG Fantasy. You see the Twitter names on the screen. Guys, this is the time of year, whether you're doing best balls, redraft, dynasty, you're tracking ADPs all across the board. If you're doing it right and you're as degen as the 4 on the screen. And what better way to look at the ADP movements? That elevator goes up and down. And, you know, there's guys you want, there's guys you don't want. The man we have on tonight, Theo, famous for a bit of a fade list. And famous for just how he crushes the high stakes. Welcome our man in, Theo.
Yes, so we're happy to invite Nelson Sousa back onto the GOAT District podcast. Nelson has been on the podcast before, just crushed it. Nelson is one of the most successful high stakes fantasy football players in the country. If you draft in the NFFC, you don't want to see him across from you in a draft, that's for sure. I have the pleasure of splitting teams with Nelson. We split a team in the New York Super. I've drafted with him. I've drafted against him. It's much better drafting with him. And we're really happy to have him back on the pod tonight. Nelson also drops fire content over at FTN Fantasy. He does the high stakes content that they have over there. So we're going to hear a little bit more about the fade list. So if you like what you hear tonight, we encourage you to subscribe, and you can read the entire fade list that Nelson puts out. And he also puts out a weekly high stakes waiver wire column, and he does a few more articles. He just dropped his breakout running back article. We're going to touch on some of those great things tonight. So Nelson, welcome back to the GOAT District. How you doing tonight?
Good. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, we're totally excited. So we got to dive right in quickly.
Yeah, man, we don't want to waste any time.
Let's fire away.
So a lot of drafters have different approaches to drafting. Some are value-based. So others have a preference, such as hero RB, zero RB. They're robust RB people. You seem to have a flexible approach, but you adhere to a fade list. Have you always drafted with a fade list? Or is that something that you've developed over the years?
I would say early on when I was drafting in fantasy that I just kind of didn't like certain players each year and would just, basically fade them. Nothing written down per se. It was only, the last few years that I actually just started creating a fade list, and it was more when I got into the content industry.
Just to clarify, this is 100% fade. When you say you're fading your strategy, you mean you do not draft these guys in any situation, or does ADP play a factor?
I mean, a lot of them, I have over, 20 players on the fade list. So that's a decent amount of players that I'm basically avoiding. And majority of those 20 players are going in the first few rounds. I don't believe in, there's no point in putting a player on the list saying that I'm going to fade them if they have like a 10th round ADP. I just think that's silly. So I'm looking to avoid the landmines in the early part of the drafts because that's where it counts. With that said, some of them have to do with ADP, absolutely. And then some of them just have to do with, whether it's coming off an injury and I don't have confidence, in that player first year back. You know, a mixture of ADP, injuries, talent based off of ADP. Like if I think the player is mispriced, different things like that.
So are the rule? You have a specific kind of rules for some guys. Some guys seem to be based on feel of kind of where they're going.
Yeah. Yep. I do have some like rules that I follow. Like an example, any, running back, basically that was a waiver wire pickup the year prior, meaning wasn't drafted in a majority of drafts last year and was picked up and now has an ADP of, let's say, top 4 rounds, right around there, give and take. I always usually avoid those running backs. So, an example, although I've been in a couple of drafts where he's fallen a little bit, but the perfect example would be Elijah Mitchell. He's a guy that I'm going to be avoiding this year.
Is there a point that you take Mitchell, like 6th round, 7th round, or is it just you're pretty much staying away? If he's a bad pick early, he's still a bad pick in the middle.
Yeah, there's definitely those players that I feel like it doesn't matter where you pick them; they're just a bad pick. My belief is that Mitchell is going to end up being a bad pick, just like an example. Myles Gaskin and Mike Davis were examples last year that I had on my fade list, and a lot of people liked them going into 2021, and they felt like they were, can't miss or nice value picks, whatever you want to call it. But they were waiver wire add-ons the year prior in 2020, and you just got to be able to separate sometimes your loyalty or your biased opinion on that player. Like Elijah Mitchell was on a majority of my teams just because of the way I drafted last year. My style was kind of, I don't even know what you call it, if you call it hero running back or what, but my style was basically in the first 2 rounds, I took a running back that I could hang my hat on, and then I would fire off, 4 or 5 straight wide receivers, add in a tight end, and I would always punt. Not always, but a majority of my drafts, I would punt my RB2. So Elijah Mitchell, after week 1, fit the profile for a lot of those teams. So I was one of those guys that was firing 600 plus on Elijah Mitchell in week 2 of Fab, and he worked out great. Like he did what I needed him to do on those particular teams. But now 2022 is a brand new year, and hey, had fun with Elijah Mitchell on my team last year, but this year I'm fading him.
I think we dropped like 750 maybe on Elijah Mitchell to get him in one league, Nelson. So that was you got a lot out of him for sure. Do you have any new rules that have come into play like lately, or is it sticking kind of by your previous old rules?
Yeah, no. Another rule of mine is I usually always fade a new wide receiver in a new offense the first year. I just find historically it's worked out for me well, where that wide receiver, especially if they have a high ADP, I don't necessarily worry about wide receivers on new teams after whatever 8th round. That pick's never going to kill you. You take a guy, he busts, whatever, move on. I've burnt so many picks that I can't even remember, and it's never going to hurt your team. But those earlier round wide receivers can hurt. But this year has been unique, and I've had to adjust a little bit on that rule. So I've made up a new rule, and that's basically every single wide receiver, a lot of the elite ones seem like they've changed teams this year. Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, Allen Robinson,
AJ Brown.
AJ Brown,
Don't forget Christian Kirk. Come on, guys.
Christian Kirk, Marquise Brown, Amari Cooper. Who else am I? Juju. Who else? That might be it. But I mean, that's a lot of big name wide receivers that change teams. So I can't possibly fade every single guy. But I'm gonna tell you that, even though some of those guys are elite wide receivers, they're gonna disappoint this year. And there's gonna be guys that are gonna work out, just like 2 years ago. Stephon Diggs and DeAndre Hopkins made me look silly because they were on my fade list. I faded them. They went, Diggs went to the Bills and Hopkins obviously went to the Cardinals. And Hopkins had a second round ADP that year and killed it. And Diggs, I think, was going like in the 5th, maybe 6th round.
He was going later. Yeah, people kind of gave up on him.
Yeah, and he crushed for where he was going. So that one definitely made me look silly, but I just thought I definitely looked back and was like, okay, is this an outlier or is my process flawed because I'm not taking into consideration how elite the wide receiver is? So that was something that I definitely needed to take a look at last year. And then this year has just been magnified. So I definitely am not fading every guy that's changed teams.
What if they had a college fling, the quarterback and the receiver? Does that
factors in? Yeah. So if they've seen each other naked in the past, that definitely factors in.
I just love your descriptions better, man. Even the fading the guys you picked off waivers the year before. Like we've talked about guys, about doing that and those kind of guys, but you just worded it beautifully, Nelson. I like it.
No, I mean, it's, I like to give examples. So the perfect example is, as you guys know, Davis and Gaskin were on the fade list last year, and a lot of people, they were drafting and they were coming away with, Davis or Gaskin as their RB2, and sometimes they were coming away with them as they thought they were a value and took them as an RB3, and it turned out to be a wasted pick.
See it every year.
You had some hits last year, also as well at the wide receiver position, if I recall correctly. Can you maybe refresh our memory on those?
As far as wide receivers that I was on, or
I believe you had some fade hits last year where the guys you faded them and they definitely underperformed. I want to say it was wide receiver.
Yeah. I'm trying to think.
McLaurin, DJ Moore. I don't know, I need a couple of those.
No, I'm trying to remember right now, but there was quite a few of them actually that it ended up working out. I want to say 90% of the list at wide receiver.
I actually have it. Last year, yeah, you had Kenny Golladay, absolute big green check mark on that one.
Mm-hmm.
You had Chase Claypool, huge check mark on that one. You had Julio Jones, huge check mark on that one. You had Cortland Sutton, that would have been a check mark. And that's, you paid for the list right there for people if they just didn't draft those guys. So the fade list has been very, very successful. Nelson's not going to toot his own horn, but it's definitely if you're spending a lot of money on high stakes or even home leagues, having this sort of information is definitely a help to you, as well as Nelson's waiver wire selections.
No, I appreciate that, Theo, and honestly, sometimes my online persona comes off as cocky, but I'm actually more of in real life I'm more humble than anything else, and so I do appreciate you pumping that up. The only thing I would like to emphasize is it's easy to focus on the guys that I did miss on in the fade list. But one thing to keep in mind is all those players have high ADPs. I'm talking about, we're fading guys in the first, second round. So, that's not easy to do. I challenge most people, out there that have, must avoid or fadeless, that they, do content for a site, and you'll see that their ADP compared to the ADP of the players that I'm fading are night and day.
Can I ask a none on the script question for you? This is a bit, for my own personal game, but I feel like I run into this in every draft. And you're talking about running or receivers going to new situations. What about something like Denver, where you have a new quarterback coming in? You've got two receivers. You don't have consistency with either one of them showing production for a long period of time. How do you approach a situation like we have in Denver?
I think it's, you try to get as much information as you can. If I have any type of connection that I can try to get information on that is not readily available, publicly, that, you would see from a beat reporter or anything like that. I try to get information on that. Try to, catch up on what's going on. Are they building chemistry? The perfect example was Stafford and Cooper Kupp, and the chemistry that they built their first year together.
We talked about the fade list with Nelson. Nelson gave us Elijah Mitchell. Maybe we could go around the horn here. I'm curious to see Dan. Dan is a very sharp player as well. Dan, do you have a guy you're fading at ADP right now, or maybe one or two of them?
Oh yeah, definitely. Probably the low hanging fruit is like Josh Jacobs.
That's literally who I was going to say. Thank you very much, Dan. Now I got to think of another one.
I'm here to steal your guys.
Dan always steals mine.
Unbelievable.
Well, I'm mixing it up. I'm stealing Theo's this time. So
Nice.
But yeah, Josh Jacobs is just such an easy fade for me. I mean, he's really not going super high, but even as high, even going as kind of a back end RB2, which is where he's going right now, he's still a fade for me, just because Josh McDaniels, his tendency has always been to really divvy up the rush load. They didn't pick up his option, and that's when teams do things like that. That's telling as well. We don't know how much of how many targets he's going to be getting. Especially with Drake around, and then they drafted Zamir White in the third round. There's just kind of a steady drumbeat of things that say that Oakland doesn't really, or Las Vegas doesn't really believe in Josh Jacobs right now.
How about you, JD?
Two running backs early I fade, or one is Derrick Henry, the other one is Javonte Williams. I think Dan and I had a bit of a chat about Williams. You're drafting him at his ceiling, in my opinion. I mean, how much farther is he going to go? He was even creeping back into the first earlier in the draft season. Now it's kind of settled into the middle of the first and the 1 QBs. Again, with Gordon there, it comes down to opportunity cost, right? The receivers that are available in that range to me are way more attractive. And, the more I draft, the more, kind of like Nelson was talking about, the hero RB approach. I feel like that's kind of it's either that or Andrew's pound the receiver approach these days. But usually those two running backs have been fading early.
Yeah, for me, Jacobs, I completely agree with Dan. I have worries about Chris Godwin this year, coming off of an injury. He's a guy, especially where, if you look at some of the wide receivers right around him, I mean, to take a Godwin over, just looking at Fantasy Mojo now, to take a Godwin over a Brandon Cooks or Rashad Bateman is just not something I could do at this point. And it's sad for me to say, I think Antonio Gibson is one where it's going to be really difficult for me to take him at this point. I think his weekly usage is going to be hard to predict. And I think that's a tough one because I love the player. So, there's a few more here and there, but I think Jacobs is one I'm definitely not going to touch. And if we have like some late word that Godwin's recovering big time or something, that might be a guy that I want to start adding again. But I'm a little worried about the situation there.
I'm glad you mentioned Godwin. When I took Sutton in the one we're doing, the four of us, the Superflex best ball on FFPC, I took Sutton in the 7th round because I had Evans in the 4th. I thought about it for a quick second, throwing Godwin in there and doing like whatever you call that. Is it naked stack without the QB or something like that? But I don't know, Godwin scares me, man. Anyone who's missing, that you're sure is going to miss at least a few games is always scary when you're talking in the first 6 to 8 rounds, in my opinion.
Do we have any more questions about the fade list for Nelson, guys? I think we covered a lot.
Did he talk about that he was drafting naked? Well, I didn't catch it.
It's a Canadian thing. It's a Canadian thing. As soon as it gets over 15 degrees, we just start taking it off when we're drafting.
All right. Okay. I'm not judging.
There's the guys doing the cardio drafting. We do naked drafting here in the district.
So, okay.
Right.
Once it hits 45 degrees, I mean, in Canada, they go nuts. They go real wild. Barbecuing, naked, you never know.
Never mind. The weather's been awful up here.
Not sure which is worse, the naked drafting or the squat drafting.
Dan, you always, there it is.
Yeah.
Give you a little air horn. You always catch me off guard with those.
So pivoting over to some redraft questions here. You've been drafting, Nelson. You've been drafting in the 350s in the RotoWire online championships. Who are some of the players that you've seen rising as we transition from the early spring drafts into the summer season? We're at the beginning of June drafts.
I don't think I've done enough drafts just yet to take notice of anyone moving up significantly. I think you're going to see that come the month of July. So from taking the sample size of the drafts in June, and then once we hit July, I think that's when you start seeing guys fluctuate just based on, news, whether we see something on Twitter or any type of hype, and then we see those players move up. But right now, I haven't really, noticed anyone really, there's a few guys getting hyped up, but I haven't really seen anyone like jump a couple of rounds that it would be noticeable.
How about you, Dan?
Nobody really so far, but I mean, as mandatory mini camps are really rolling right now. All it's going to take is a highlight catch or two, or a beat reporter saying, a connection between quarterback X and receiver Y seems really strong, or something like that. Things like that are going to definitely start to move the needle. And when we get into July, a lot of what happens isn't really based on anything, that's going on in the field, because most of the time there's really nothing going on in the field. The mandatory mini camps are over. The training camps haven't started. So when you're seeing movement in July, it's usually just steam that's coming off of, people getting steamed up on Twitter, or, a fluff piece by a beat writer or something like that. And those are definitely the ones, that you want to fade a little bit more.
I will say that I do see Travis Etienne. I think that the market has completely moved on him. I think that we're going to start seeing Etienne occasionally in the 3rd, where, maybe if you were drafting like we were in best ball early on, you could get him in the 5th. I think you're starting to see Cortland Sutton get a lot of steam. I think it's smart players are kind of, and I should say there's some smart players who also like Judy, but I think there's, some sharp players that are on Cortland Sutton right now. And he's one that you could easily see having a great year with, with Russell Wilson. And the guy who's just rising from, in my opinion, is Michael Pittman right now, where Michael Pittman, it's funny, when the offseason starts, he gets on all these kind of breakout lists. Like he could be a wide receiver 1. People talk up, the Matt Ryan coming over there. It's going to be a better offense. But now it's Michael Pittman's being drafted as a wide receiver 1. The last 2 drafts I've been in, he's been wide receiver 14 and wide receiver 12. So there's absolutely no discount. He's a guy that I think is just going to continue to kind of move up. And those for me were kind of the the guys we've seen move. And obviously, I think Saquon Barkley. I think Saquon was, you were getting him at a bit of a discount, but I think now that he's, based on what they didn't do in the draft, and based on how healthy he is and the improved O-line, I think that he's going to be locked into the second round, and those days of like third round ADP are over. I know, like maybe in like an underdog draft he still falls, but if you're looking at FFPC, NFFC boards, it's just not happening anymore.
Yeah, Pittman especially has gone from like, there were drafts you could get him in the 7th round going on in like March, and
it's in the last month or so.
Yeah, and now he's he's pretty strongly moved in to the 3-4 turn, and the sharper players are starting to pull him into the 3rd round.
Do you have any thoughts on any of those guys right now, Nelson? Or
I mean, if we're looking at it's actually a good conversation if we're like predicting guys that are going to move up. Another example would probably be Alvin Kamara, where he's going in drafts. And I think if we get word that nothing legally is going to come of, whatever that situation was with him this offseason, then I don't see why he shouldn't be a 1st-round pick. And I've seen drafts where he's fallen to the 3rd round.
Do the Saints play in Vegas at all this year? No, anyone?
No, don't believe so. So, but he's and it sounds like this whole thing could end up not happening. There might be no decision on any kind of discipline or anything by the NFL until next year. That's certainly not a guarantee or anything, but it kind of seems like it's trending that way. So to me, it's been a little bit surprising that Kamara hasn't started to gain at least a little bit of steam even right now.
And then how about, again, you said that, you haven't had enough under your belt for fallers at this point, but, one guy that I've seen fall is Antonio Gibson. I think you're also seeing Juju Smith-Schuster fall a little bit. We saw in our hardway draft, he went to Dave Hubbard and Billy Muzio, I think at the 7-8 turn, which is going to be pretty low for him. But I feel like people are starting to. I'll throw Sky Moore. We should have mentioned him as a riser. I think that Sky Moore is kind of moving up, and I think his ADP is kind of converging with Juju, and then. In terms of fallers, there's not too many other fallers off the top of my head. How about you guys?
I was going to say Marquise Brown moved up quite a bit. He's up in the 4th. And I find Juju, I feel like Juju's actually moved up, if anything. He's up in the 6th round. And like on average, if you look at, according to Mojo right now, from May 30th to June 6th, I don't know. I don't know how you guys feel. I know there's uncertainty there, but he feels like he's kind of rising up as the favorite for targets in KC from what I see in my drafts. Yeah,
I mean he's definitely interesting. I think it's an offense you obviously have to take shots on. I'm interested in seeing like how Sky Moore, the drum beats in Kansas City for him, because I think he's super interesting. Dan, I know you took Sky Moore with Juju still on the board in our hardway draft. Maybe you could share your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I mean, basically, I was actually kind of hoping that I might get a chance to take Juju on the way back. I figured it was unlikely, but the possibility existed. But I'm looking at Sky and Juju, and I'm going, I needed to bet on the guy who was going to be more likely to be peaking towards the end of the year rather than the beginning of the year. So I felt like Sky Moore was that player. Just fit my team build a little bit.
I was going to say, who are the other receivers that you had at that point? That makes a difference, right?
I have the board in front. It was Dan's wide receiver 3, but he had Jamar Chase and Brandon Cooks pretty locked in. So, and wide receivers flew in that draft. I mean, we saw wide receivers just flying. So that was, the drafters in that league we were all aggressive for wide receiver that night. So Dan had to go with Moore in that one.
And what I did on the way back is I picked up Russell Gage, who is, to me, kind of like almost the exact opposite of a Sky Moore.
Love Gage.
Yeah, but Gage is getting a lot of steam, and he's definitely moving up. But Gage, if Godwin is out for the first 6 weeks or something like that, Gage is going to really, he's going to be a great value. He's going to be putting out a ton of points. So to me, he pairs up really well with a guy like Sky Moore.
No, for sure.
Theo, when I started that Triflex, I asked you guys, what's the one advice you would give me as my first Triflex? And I know it's 3 receiver, but ever since then, going into every draft, I find it really hard to not smash receivers early because I think that people are still thinking it's super deep at receiver. But when you're looking at the different tiers and where the tiers break, I don't know, Nelson. I don't know if you disagree with me. I feel like you get to a certain point and you're like, I just feel like around 7, 8-ish. I'm like, oh man, I'm glad I'm loaded at receiver right now.
I mean, that's my style anyway, JD. I usually have anywhere from 5 to 6 wide receivers by the 8th or 9th round. So I start looking at whether it's quarterback or handcuff running backs at that point. So I agree with you. I mean, that's my preference.
Theo, what are you laughing at? You look like
I'm laughing. I got a. It was just a tweet. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, dude. I thought you were laughing at something we were talking about.
No. Nelson's draft structure is absolutely serious and on point. That was not what that's about.
Good recovery, Theo. I love it.
That was a great question from 1912. 1912 is pointing out Miles Sanders and CEH seem to have been rising, and I would say it's solidifying. They're like not rising to a point where they're not like definitely scratch them off the list kind of guys, but they've like solidified where people are kind of like saying, okay, the situation looks like this. Nelson, what are your thoughts on CH and Miles Sanders? Kind of those really low end RB2s, maybe high end RB3s.
Yeah, those are guys that come into my thought process based on how I build my teams. So that they would be RB2s. Very rarely are you going to see for me, a draft where I'm taking them as an RB3. Usually I'm hammering and I want to get my 4th wide receiver, my flex. My preference definitely is at flex to play a wide receiver. So, I like Sanders. I like CEH as a possible RB2. Not really into them, as RB3. RB3, I'm usually, I'm pushing that back a little further.
I find it super hard to pull the trigger on those guys. It's funny you brought that 1912 brought these 2 guys. I just took, not to bring it back to our Superflex best ball we're doing, but I've got Mahomes and Rodgers was in the 8th round. Gabe Davis was sitting there, and so is CEH. And with Mahomes, I'm thinking, I don't care to stack Mahomes with anyone this year, maybe someone later, but if I get him naked, I don't really care. But CH was there, and I just can't pull the trigger on him and Miles as much as I kind of like Miles coming into the season. And what it is, Nelson, I don't know if you agree, it's just the options later on and what you're passing up when you take these guys, right? Like if I can get Gainwell in Philly later on, and I feel like he's going to give me as much as I need in a season that maybe Sanders will.
Well, I mean, in fairness, the range of outcomes for Miles Sanders, he is a talented guy. And, RB1 is in his range of outcomes this year. So I would definitely want to get exposure to a guy like that because he's running behind an elite offensive line. Yes, Jalen Hurts, likes to run the ball and everything, but he's got some talented playmakers around him. So it's just a matter of him staying healthy and, them using him. He doesn't even need, a monster workload. He just needs enough touches and he's a good, catcher out of the backfield. So I want to have some exposure to Miles Sanders. I wouldn't say like I'm like really bullish where I want to take him on every team, but he makes some sense. Like Gainwell, talented kid and everything, but if Sanders is healthy, he's going to see the majority of the touches.
That's a concern for me though, is the health factor.
Yep.
It's funny. If you just look at Nelson talked about like the range of outcomes with Sanders. Sanders had 137 rushing attempts. The next, which was second highest on the team, he was right behind Jalen Hurts, and that's in only 12 games. And he had 0 rushing touchdowns. And Jordan Howard managed to find the end zone 3 times. Boston Scott 7 times, and
who does that remind you of, Theo? Who's the other guy we're talking about?
You told me.
CEH, right? Which is also what concerns you about a guy like Gibson, right? Just these guys that are not playing in the end zone, and they're not necessarily in those high opportunities.
I don't know. With CEH, I did like an early NFFC draft champions, and I got him super, super late, and I was like, this is a good value. But when CEH starts really creeping up, I don't think it's a guy I'm really going to have that much of. I don't know. Maybe I need to open my horizons to that. What do you think, Dan?
I think now is a good time to get exposure to guys like Sanders and CEH, because I mean, they're probably going about as low as they're going to go in this entire offseason right now, unless some really bad news comes out. So I think the odds are that they're more likely to rise than fall, and those are the players that I'm always looking to get, at this time of year, especially when I'm playing in a lot of, when you're drafting right now, the odds are you're drafting with, a 9 to 11 other sharks. I mean, there's just not too many fish out there in drafts right now where you can feel like, yeah, this guy has no clue. So when you're drafting with the Sharks, getting the exposure to the guys that you feel like you're not going to be able to get them at this spot in August, it's the time to do it.
What is there another guy that you guys think will rise up throughout the summer? Like we saw Jerry Jeudy, when he was in June, he was very attainable. When it got to, September drafts, he was going, wide receiver 16. Is there anybody you guys see as another potential summer riser? I'll throw one out. I think Rashad Bateman's going to continue to rise up. I think there'll be, big time drum beats in Baltimore, and I think that he'll be a big part of the offense. And I think we'll get some, I think they're a team that's well covered by the beat writers. We always find out a lot about Baltimore, and I think that Bateman's a guy that will cost more in a couple months than he does right now. Is there anybody you guys off the top of your head think kind of falls into that category?
Actually, the guy that comes to mind, he's already moved up, actually, is Allen Robinson. And I think he's just going to continue to move up a little bit.
I think the guy's
about Robinson right now, Nelson. I mean, to me, he's kind of getting on the edge of a little bit overbaked here.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 2 ways to look at it.
What do you mean by overbaked, Dan? Like he's just getting taken too high, or
I think he's getting. I think he's getting pushed up to kind of the top of his range of outcomes.
Okay.
I mean, one thought process. I think you're going to see some drafters that look at Cooper Kupp as having a historic outlier season, and they feel like, okay, try and do that again. And they're going to be passing on Cooper Kupp with his, number 2, number 3 ADP, and, taking Robinson in those drafts. And then there's the others that look at it and say, well, you know what? Where was Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp going last year? They were going, 3rd, 4th, end of the 3rd, early 4th round for ADP last year. So they're looking at it as those targets have been vacated. Beckham wasn't re-signed back, obviously, with the ACL and everything in the Super Bowl. So someone else has got to catch the ball in a volume offense. So there's definitely a couple of schools of thought on Robinson and why he's going to continue to move up. I'm not sure if I don't know if we've reached, peak just yet, Dan. I think in drafts, I still see him going in the 5th round of drafts. I think once we reach where Robinson goes consistently early fourth round, I think you're going to reach kind of like that's the plateau there.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot in the mid fourth, and that's a point where I'm just like, man, I'd rather take a chance on some other guys who are going a little bit later than him. And I get all the positives, having to do with the offense and all that. I just worry about a guy who just, clearly mailed it in last year, and how much of that was, he's never been a guy who's been, like a great separator or anything like that. I mean, you just have to wonder if he's one of those guys who is not going to age gracefully.
Well, let me play devil's advocate. He is one of the wide receivers. He's like the poster boy of wide receivers playing with shitty quarterbacks their whole career. And he's actually been able to be pretty productive, considering the quarterbacks that he's played with. And definitely the last 2 years, you've seen he's been on a downturn, but I believe he's still young enough that I don't think we've reached the point where we need to be concerned about him. It's the lack of production is to do with age. I just think that it probably reached, nagging injuries. The offense in Chicago was a total shit show. Justin Fields, not on the same page with him. Just a total struggle there. And now this year, for the first time in his career, he gets to play with the best quarterback he's ever had since he joined the NFL. So my devil's advocate is that you could see possibly, a re-breakout. I mean, he's already broken out. He's already a household name, but I think you could see that bounce back year from him playing with Stafford and having, Cooper Kupp across from him, because keep in mind, Kupp had a monster season last year. That defensive coordinators, when they play the Rams, Kupp is going to be the center of attention. And how do we control this guy where he just doesn't kill us? And, Robinson's able to win those one-on-one matchups and those jump balls, even though he can't separate or hasn't been a great separator. I definitely could see where he has one of those seasons where, I don't know, let's say he catches 60, 70 balls, 1,000 yards, double-digit touchdowns. Can you see that in the range of outcomes?
I can see that in the range of outcomes. I mean, I think that's, at least in the touchdowns, I think that's definitely, pushing top end. I could see him catching 80 balls potentially. Yardage, 1,000, something like that. But let's do a quick OTC on the clock. How about DK Metcalf or Allen Robinson?
Robinson.
What's that?
Robinson
over DK?
Yeah.
Robinson or Terry McLaurin?
That one's closer. I'd probably say those are even, but I'd probably lean McLaurin because we got to pick one.
Okay. Robinson or DJ Moore?
I'm going to take DJ Moore.
Okay. So we're kind of, I think, looking at where you're at on him, I mean, and where those players are likely to go. I mean, I think we're kind of talking, late fourth round being the comfort level for Allen Robinson. You think that's fair to say? I mean, it seems like at least in FFPC, it would probably be a little bit earlier than that in an FFC. But if he's going around that area, I think that still can make sense for me. I would want to have some exposure to him. But if he starts going up in the, before DJ Moore, around, Deontay Johnson, Mike Evans, or Waddle, guys like that, then it's going to be hard for me to pull the trigger on him.
Yeah, I don't know if he ever reaches that, but I mean that's kind of where Woods and Cup were going last year.
Right.
So, was that what was wrong with the drafters last year when they established that ADP where both those guys in the Rams offense were going in similar spots of having an early 4th round ADP?
Yeah, and looking at NFFC ADP, that's Robinson probably is more early 4th round. When I was talking, when I was expressing surprise, I'm thinking FFPC ADP, where you're going to get a few more running backs and a few more tight ends pushing the wide receivers down a little bit. So.
Yeah.
I think we're actually probably talking about, Robinson being in the same range. We're just kind of expressing it in different ways.
It's definitely a difficult range to pick wide receivers. There's a few very appealing options in that range for sure.
And here's the thing. I mean, there's probably 24 wide receiver ones out there, if you ask most people.
And then about 30 more wide receiver 3s.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's just, and half the battle is just kind of trying to weed out the ones, that really don't belong. Some of those 24 wide receiver ones are going to fail just because of injury or whatever, and it's going to be really hard to see coming. But, there's going to be about 6 of those 24 guys who will all be lumped in that same category, where we just got to be able to say, no, this guy does not belong. This guy does not belong.
Yeah, so just to be transparent, I am probably, right now it's still early June, but I'm probably going to be a guy that's going to be on Robinson and have my fair share of him. So just to, put it out there, that's why I was playing devil's advocate, is because I look at it as, it was a career year for Cup. I had Cup ahead of Robert Woods in my rankings. I ended up drafting Cup. I think I had mid-30s. So it was right around 35, 36% Cooper Cup on teams, which worked out, great. But I could see where the defensive attention is on Cup, and Robinson is hyped up to be playing with Stafford. He's in LA. He's on a great team. That's another thing, first time in a long time, you go from the Bears and Jacksonville, and now you're on a great team. I definitely could see where, he bounces back when a lot of people are kind of writing him off.
I think also a devil's advocate is year 2 for Matt Stafford in the Sean McVay offense. Maybe we're seeing him even be sharper and more comfortable and even more efficient. So it's definitely a super interesting player to look at. Odell coming over there after struggling and then looking very good kind of also makes me a lot more open to Allen Robinson doing well. I think McVay's just a sharp guy and puts his people in a place to succeed.
Right. So let's chase this rabbit just a little bit further. How high is too high for Cooper Kupp, Nelson?
I mean, I'm still gonna draft him. He's not one of the, wide receivers that I put on the fade list. So there is that.
1912 will be happy to hear that. Shout out to the chat.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still, if I'm in the 2-hole or 3-hole, and I still want to own my fair share of Cooper Kupp, but I'm not going to be overweight on him. Just to give you an example, I probably, even though I have Kupp in my rankings number 1, I prefer Jefferson.
I was going to say I take him after Jefferson and Chase. He's my receiver 3 when I'm drafting.
Yeah, and that's one of those cases where you're saying that, just to be clear for everybody, where you're saying, you think Jefferson is the better bet, but that you've got to take Kupp. You're not going to get Kupp if you keep taking Jefferson over Kupp.
Correct.
Okay.
That's actually a great segue. Not to jump out of order in the show sheet, but right now there's a clear big three wide receivers right now among drafters, NFFC, FFPC. It's all Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and Cooper Kupp. I don't think you'll see any drafts where those guys are not in the top three wide receivers taken. Do you see, and this is a question for everybody, we could start with Nelson. Do you see one of those players finishing as wide receiver 1 overall? And are there any other players that among wide receivers that you could see smashing and finishing as 1 overall and leapfrogging those guys? Who would be your best bet to maybe leapfrog them, not among those big three? So maybe start out with, you take it any way you want with that one, Nelson. Is that a justifiable big three? And is there anybody that you think, besides those big three, would be your bet to finish as wide receiver 1 overall in fantasy this year?
Yeah, I mean, listen, Kupp had such a monster season that he could regress a good amount and still finish as wide receiver 1. Jefferson and Chase are so talented that, yeah, absolutely no brainer that they could finish as wide receiver 1. Like I said, my preference is Jefferson this year. And then the two other guys that are going just a little bit later, late first, early second round, is Diggs and CeeDee Lamb. Those are the guys that I could see finishing as the wide receiver 1 this year.
Yeah, Lamb would have been my pick too.
How about you, Dan?
Diggs definitely is my pick there, and I guess I would give like kind of the dark horse chance to T. Higgins, but that would probably require Chase to miss a few weeks due to injury. Not outside the realm of possibility, but definitely more of a dark horse than the others.
I'll throw Devontae Adams in there. I'm big on Diggs. I have a ton of Diggs. It's hard for me not to draft Diggs. I don't want to lock myself into Diggs maybe as much as I have in some of these dynasty startups. But I think he could absolutely smash. They certainly paid him, and I think that offense is going to hum. So Diggs is a great name there. Lamb should see the volume boost, but Adams is like, we don't know what that Vegas offense is going to look like, but I think it could look really, really good. And I could see Adams just absolutely smashing his first year there. So I'll throw his name. And then my sleeper, I really, really believe in Jalen Waddle. And I know he might be a guy that's going a little bit later. But I think if there's a guy that could kind of come out of nowhere, I think he's getting pushed down because of the Tyreek Hill signing. But I think Waddle could absolutely smash. He had 102 receptions last year. There's a chance that offense takes a big step forward and Waddle just goes nuts. So that would be like my dark horse, galaxy braining wide receiver 1 overall. Wanted to just pivot over to Dynasty briefly. We have a lot of Dynasty listeners. I want to hear your thoughts basically on the rookie class, Nelson. But mainly last year on this pod, you gave everybody Amon-Ra St. Brown as a guy that we should be drafting and holding among the rookies. Who are your favorite rookies this year? And which rookies do you see making the largest redraft impacts?
Sure. For rookie wide receivers, my favorite that I think is, great for whether dynasty or redraft, because I think he's going to make an immediate impact, is Chris Olave.
Nice. Just drafted him. Sweet. Stacked him with Winston. Beautiful.
Yeah, I love the situation there too.
Yeah, so he's my, kind of like Amon-Ra St. Brown. It took a while for him to get going, but he was kind of, further down most people's lists. And I think, Olave, everyone knows, who he is. And I'm not sure where you guys have him ranked in Dynasty. So I'd actually ask your you guys that question because I don't do much dynasty. So, but I think Olav is my favorite wide receiver out of the whole group.
Yeah,
I like that call a lot.
Yeah, he's right in there with me or for me. I think Jameson Williams this year probably, is going to struggle a little bit more because he's got to recover from this ACL and all that. But he's the player I like the most out of this group of wide receivers that I think has absolutely the highest ceiling. But yeah, Olav is in just a great situation right now. And, I like a lot of things about him. And he's really kind of the last of the highly touted rookie wide receivers to go off the board. I mean, it's basically him or Sky Moore. So out of the first rounders, the NFL draft first rounders, Olave is usually the last to go other than Jahan Dotson.
Yep. And then, I mean, obviously all you guys do dynasty, so you're aware of all these guys, but I'm not even going to use, sneaky, but I'd probably say the rookie wide receiver that I think goes a little later that could surprise people is David Bell.
Yes.
We love David Bell in the GOAT District, Nelson. That's
do.
great to hear you on him.
Okay.
We're ringing the bell constantly.
We just want your validation on our guys. How do you feel about Tolbert while we're at it? I don't know.
He's another one that I really liked. Nobody knew anything about this kid. You guys would have to look back on I would have to look back on my tweets, but this was right around the combine or maybe before the NFL combine.
We'll get the intern on it.
Yeah, get the intern on it and check the tweet. But I want to say that I posted like my top 5 favorite rookies, and Tolbert made that list as a top 5. Nice. And he was relatively a no-name before he got drafted by the Cowboys, and then everyone just kind of like, well, Gallup coming off the injury and Washington's there, we all know who James Washington is at this point in his career. So it's kind of like, wait a minute here, Jalen Tolbert could make some noise. So, but I was interested in that kid already once I was watching film and just, looking at what he could do.
Guys, we're 57 in, guys. We're 57 minutes of pure goodness, pure GOATness, as we say here in the district. We appreciate you guys tuning in. The chat has been kicking tonight. Guys, smash the like, smash the subscribe button. We appreciate all the support you guys give us. 2 things, FFPC and Underdog. If you're not on either one of these platforms right now, we will give you free money in your face, up to $100 on Underdog. Sign up, use the code DISTRICT, deposit, they'll match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you've ever made. You can be drafting for $75K with a $5 entry in the puppy, the BBM 3 Best Ball Mania, only drafting for $2 million. What did it cost you, honey? $25. And you won how much? You can play fantasy 24 hours a day, honey. That's what we're talking about. Underdog right now. I mean, make a couple 2 million playing fantasy football. You can be playing golf, baseball, hockey playoffs are smoking right now at Underdog Fantasy and at myffpc.com, guys. You hear us talk on the regular. You've got $1 million. You've got the football guys for $500,000. You've got a best ball tournament for $200,000, 125 buy-in. You've got a $35 buy-in Superflex best ball tournament for $10,000, and you've got dynasty startups and best balls through the Yazoo. I don't know if that's a saying, but it sounded cool. So, guys, myffpc.com, tag at Go District or any one of us. We'll get you a sign-up bonus credit. Underdog, use the code District. We appreciate you all. And but actually, Theo, before I give it back to you, because, man, when you start going, the fire it's like a forest fire, man, out there.
The sponsors hate it.
It's like where Nate used to live out there in Cali, where those forest fires, it just starts with a little flame and it just keeps going. But we've got some questions from the chat I want to throw on here. We've got FFQ later. What do you think about the handcuffs rising now? Like Hassan and Snoop Connor, I know is one of our sneaky favorites here in the district. Might be his name, might be something else. Up to the 14th, 15th versus 18th, 20th last month. How do you feel about the rise in those two rookie running backs, Nelson?
Haskins is definitely a favorite of mine, and that's just game theory. Without giving out too many names, Derrick Henry is on the fade list, and anytime I'm fading a running back, I'm usually looking to acquire the handcuff or backup running back. And right now, I'm going to assume that Haskins is the guy there.
Anything to add, Dan and Theo, before I go to FF's next question? Because he's been waiting patiently. We got to give him a couple here.
No, we talked about Hassan Haskins on the pod before. He's a guy that I've been drafting as well. And then, Dan, maybe you could share a little more about Snoop Connor. Now that rookie drafts are over, Dan is allowed to talk about him.
Yeah. I mean, both these guys are just kind of, as Nelson said, they're situational plays. You're looking at the situation. You're going, okay, this makes sense. And, for me, 14th, 15th round, 18th, 20th round, there's not a great deal of difference between them. I don't mind chasing guys up that high. If all of a sudden we're talking about 12th round or something like that, that's definitely getting a little bit overbaked. But I don't have any problem taking Hassan. Like I took him in the hard way draft at where did I take?
You took him in the 13th round.
Yeah, I took him in the 13th round.
Cheap. Yeah. So
and I knew, when I took him, I even took him before Zamir White because I knew that in this hard way draft, these guys were never going to let him go, any further. He was not coming back to me in the 14th round because I knew Hubbard was sitting over there at the end, and I knew he was going to be, double tapping running back, and I was like, "There's no way Haskins makes it back."
Sipping on gin and juice in the corner.
Right, exactly. So I was actually surprised that Zamir White made it back to me in the 14th. But those are the kind of plays that you want to make. Snoop, that's just a bet on James Robinson and his Achilles not being ready to go at the start of the season.
And that coaching regime not necessarily being his,
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, Doug Peterson, he often does not really, he'll cycle through multiple running backs. He'll have one guy who's definitely the lead back, but there's going to be other contributors, and if something happens to ETN, so you're just looking for situations like that where you can just kind of tell yourself a story and say, this is how this guy, just falls into a lot of work.
Yeah, I think that I just to kind of piggyback off of what Dan said. I mean, last summer, if you're drafting in June, you saw, we don't wish injuries on anybody, but we saw what happened to Cam Akers. We saw what happened to J.K. Dobbins. We saw what happened to Travis Etienne. So, drafting these affordable handcuffs or guys that we think are the safer bets on being the handcuff can really be fruitful for these early drafts. It's kind of it's especially when there's kind of a little less clarity between the RB2 and the RB3. I think that's where you kind of find your value. Where if you ask some people, they might say it's Dontrell Hilliard. So, but I think the sharp people are on Hassan Haskins, and that's where I want to put my money.
Let's go a little higher in the rookie running back rankings. The man who went off the 101 in most drafts, I think whether it's super flex or not, was Mr. Hall out in New York. How do you feel about his ADP rising right now, Nelson?
I'm not a big fan of it, actually. I'm not that high on the Jets offense this year. I think for Dynasty, he's totally fine. He's a very talented running back, but for redraft, he's not really. I'm not enticed to be drafting him where he's going. And I'm also one of the people that's on a short list that thinks that Michael Carter is still going to be involved and not totally phased out. So when you consider where people are willing to draft Breece Hall and what the offense is going to be and everything, I still think it's a work in progress. I'm not really all that interested.
I think that makes a lot of sense, Nelson. And Dwayne McFarland did a study on this last year for PFF, and he was, he was looking at when a team drafts a running back, on day 2, and then how easily can they get themselves worked into the lead role, and it doesn't happen in the rookie year as often as people like to imagine that it does. And last year, he was talking about maybe, we should pump the brakes a little bit on Javonte Williams.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, Melvin Gordon was, a full 50% or more of that committee. And, you can easily see the same situation potentially developing in New York, where that established back who's had at least a year, to in the system and in the NFL to hold back a rookie just enough where, when everybody's steaming up that rookie into a top 4, top 5 round position, it just makes that rookie not worth taking at that spot.
Yeah, I mean, Michael Carter to me passed the eye test. So when I was watching the games, there's nothing that stood out to me that I can sit here today and say, well, yeah, no brainer. I mean, they needed to draft Breece Hall. That's easy. He's going to be the starting running back. He's going to get the full workload because Michael Carter sucks. That's to me, that's not the case.
So you're going to be overweight on Carter then.
I'm definitely going to draft. Yeah, I mean, where's he going? Like 9th round in draft
or later?
Yeah, I'm interested. It's right around in my wheelhouse of when I start taking and I start looking at running backs at that point. And, I'm going to be taking Carter because, again, Breece Hall, I think that ADP is a little mispriced. I think guys, especially early on in these drafts, in redraft, guys fall in love with these rookies often, and they get hyped up. And I'm not a big fan of this rookie class this year.
And I think people forget. Sorry, Theo. Look at JT, right? I'm his biggest fan, man. I love me some JT. But you look at his first 10 weeks as a rookie, he wasn't smashing anything. He had 1 week. He was a top 10 running back. Otherwise, he was like the running back 35, 28, 47, 19, 37, 23. He wasn't flexing crazy numbers until he got into the double digits in the second half. And he's obviously at the pinnacle. So, you got to manage the expectations, as they say, with the rookies. And especially when you're paying that high price in those top 3 rounds, similar to what we said about Javonte Williams that you mentioned, you're drafting these guys at their possible ceiling in a lot of the situations. This might be one of them.
I'm in a Football Guys slow draft right now, putting together a monster. But I got Michael Carter at the 1207 as running back 50.
Where'd you get him? Sorry, where'd you get him?
He is running back 50. I took him at the 1207. I considered him at the 1105, but I went with Khalil Herbert. So I got Khalil Herbert and Michael Carter in those 2 rounds. And shout out to FF Culator who got him even later in a puppy draft. So it's the community has cooled on Carter. I also think that he's the kind of guy that you could get him in some FFPC dynasty leagues right now for a third. I think some people might consider him a potential cut, and he's a guy that I think will play in the league a long time. Even if Breece Hall kind of makes him a little bit dustier than maybe we're considering right now. I think that he's the kind of guy that's going to be a high-end handcuff for a long time. So
guys, Nick Chubb
that's his low side.
Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, they do perfectly well in the same backfield. I could see a very similar, when you're looking production from the two, I could see something like that in New York. From like you said, Nelson, Carter just looked
eventually, but that Jets O-line has a long ways to go compared to that Cleveland O-line.
Yeah, it was more the split. It was more the split. You're absolutely right.
In the spirit of both playing the running back positions and having an offensive line.
Yeah. Here are some guys that Michael Carter is going around running back wise. he's going according to FFPC ADP Fantasy Mojo. He's going in the middle of the 11th round. Darrell Henderson, Nyheim Hines, Tyler Algier, and Tyrion Davis-Price are all going in the same round. I mean, out of those five, I would take Michael Carter absolutely over any of them.
Wanted to pivot over to the one-off positions. We can kind of combine this question, but last year you were very successful with targeting Tom Brady and Tampa Bay stacks. What is your approach this season to the quarterback position? Are you fluid? Are there a few guys you're zeroing in on? And what mistakes do you see drafters making when approaching the quarterback position?
Well, that's a good question. Just because of the number of teams I do, last year I had a little over 150 teams. I'm probably gonna fall in that range again this year. So I'm gonna want, and I play in a bunch of tournament style leagues with a big grand prize, so that's top heavy. So I'm looking to get exposure to all different quarterbacks, whether it's Josh Allen or Mahomes, a lot of those earlier quarterbacks, and then the mid-tier ones, and then even if the draft just the way it plays out, I don't mind punting back to a Derek Carr, Trey Lance, guys like that. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. So your question was about the quarterback.
So basically you're a little more open this year. Last year it seemed like maybe you had correct me if I'm wrong, but Brady, when you could, you draft Brady at value, and then this year you seem maybe a little more open to having a lot more exposure to guys.
Yeah, Brady was just obvious to me. I didn't see any way possible that in his second year with Tampa Bay, that he wasn't going to just smash. And who his receivers were, Gronk, going there, good offensive line. So that just seemed like a no-brainer. Right now, I don't have a quarterback in mind that I'm looking at that I feel the same way as Brady, but I do have my favorites. But yeah, last year was just one of those kind of outliers that, where Brady was going, he was mispriced. He was definitely undervalued. So yeah, I passed on the Mahomes and guys like that, but I still had my fair share of Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray. I still wanted to have Josh Allen, and that's just based on, volume drafting because, in the tournament, as you can see, last year, the difference maker was Joe Burrow. If you had Joe Burrow in the shootout, especially paired with, a stack with Jamar Chase, you were in the conversation, to win big money. So I'm looking to get exposure to all the quarterbacks, but yeah, my preference though is definitely even in NFFC where it's 6 points a touchdown. My preference is to kind of, not take the elite ones. So I'm not going to be ever overexposed to Allen, Mahomes, Herbert, Burrow this year because, they're the top four that are going off the board.
Makes sense. So I'll put you on the spot. Kyler Murray or Joe Burrow?
I still believe in Kyler Murray's talent. So I don't want to downplay or kind of put him down, but I'm taking Burrow.
I might lean Murray on that one. I think they're pretty close. But I just think Murray right now, with his rushing upside, and and he's playing for a contract. I think Murray could have a very big year, but they're both fine draft picks for sure. How about the tight end position? I'm sorry, go ahead, Dan.
Oh, I only asked that because I got a bet with Dave Terpoli on.
Yep.
I've got the Kyler Murray side.
Okay. Yeah. Listen, I like Kyler Murray, and I'm going to be drafting him on teams. But like I said, you put me on the spot. I got to pick one.
Yep.
I'm going to go Burrow.
So you don't really have any concerns with like the incredible efficiency of Burrow and Chase last year?
No, because he's got other talented wide receivers in Higgins and Boyd that offset that. So even if Chase takes a step back and things just don't click as well as they did towards the end of last year, I don't expect. I think Burrow had maybe was it 250 plus point weeks out of the quarterback position?
In NFFC scoring, I think you're right.
In NFFC scoring.
Yeah, it was he had a couple.
Yeah, the highest FFPC, he had 38.1 and 34.8 in weeks 16 and 17.
Yeah.
Those were his highest weeks.
And NFFC juiced up a little bit.
I will add that just we talk about offenses getting better. The Bengals did sign Ted Karras and La'el Collins, so they did. Like, we were critical about the Bengals offensive line. That was the whole narrative last year. And they definitely have improved that offensive line and put money into it. So it's definitely an interesting one.
And things were slow going with Burrow in that offense to begin the year. And we got to keep in mind he was coming off injury, and we were a little unsure of how things were going to go. The offensive line didn't really look like it was dramatically improved. And I think those things have changed. And I think now Burrow's coming off a healthy offseason. So even, I hate being, I don't like being at the head of the parade where, we're going into the parade of Joe Burrow and we're going to get slaughtered. I hate being in that kind of join the masses type of thinking, but I usually like being contrarian in that standpoint. But I do think that Burrow could actually improve off of last year.
Nice.
How about the tight end position? It's often tricky for drafters. What are you looking for this year at the tight end spot, and how are you approaching the position? And we will add that Nelson drafts in NFFC, which is not tight end premium for the FFPC listeners.
Yeah, I mean, Theo, you know my preference from us drafting together last year. I tend to not be interested in drafting those early tight ends, so you're not going to see many teams with Kelsey or Andrews on it or guys like that. But this year, I think Waller, Hawkinson, Kittle, they all present themselves as fair price where they're going in the NFFC. So I'll definitely be interested in taking a combination of those guys. Not a combination, I shouldn't say. One of those guys. Just it might just be what I'm in the mood for. So if Waller and Kittle are there, I might take Waller in one and take Kittle in the next draft. So there's going to be no rhyme or reason for it other than to just gain exposure. But, my preference is punting tight end and grabbing too late. And that's worked out through the years where I've been able to, figure out those late tight ends.
Totally makes sense. What about is there a mid-range tight end that you're especially high on, or a mid-range tight end that you think is just really that everybody else seems high on that you think is a terrible value?
Yeah, I mean the high the high end tight ends I think are bad bets this year. I think Kelsey is going to turn 33 during the this season, and no Tyreek. So that's going to take some, attention is going to be paid, is going to go towards Kelsey more with no Tyreek there, plus the age factor. I just think that I'd rather be off that ship before it sinks a year early rather than a year late. And then Andrews, I think, is just coming off of an outlier season that he's going to regress. So his ADP doesn't make sense to me going off as the number one tight end or number two in drafts. A lot of his production was when Lamar Jackson was hurt, actually. And the Ravens defense was banged up big time last year. So I think that with them returning healthy, improved, I think there's going to be less shootouts in Ravens games. So, and you're going to have, Dobbins and Gus Edwards back. So last year they were down to Tyson Williams to begin the year, which was, like their third, fourth string running back. So I think those dynamics, when you put it all together, it's a combination of everything. I just think that Andrews is a bad bet to be taking him as the number one tight end just based off of his production last year. If you look back, go look back at, those game logs. A lot of his, 11 catches, 100 yards wasn't with Lamar at quarterback. And then for the mid-tier guys that I'm interested, like I said, that Hawkinson, Waller, Kittle, I'm definitely interested. I'm probably off of Dalton Schultz. I think he's going a little too high. I don't believe in the talent.
He was at a nice value, but now he's up there.
Yeah, I'm pushing it back, and I'm going to be interested in the Cole Kmets, the Albert O's.
Dan just went swing.
Yeah,
and sorry, you just sell Albert O, so I just went swing. Albert O and Tanyan are two of my favorite targets in any draft. Like Tanyan in the 12th, Albert O in the 9th. You get those two, you're rocking.
My definitely for Cole Kmet is pretty well known on this podcast. So
yeah, those are kind of the three guys.
I definitely swinged when Nelson said he was kind of fading in Dalton Schultz where he's going right now, because I think it's reached ridiculous levels. So
yeah. And he was quick, right? Like 1 minute you're drafting and he's he's in the 8s, 7/8, I think he was. He's
ahead of Hawkinson in a lot of drafts,
which is bananas.
Hawkinson, yeah, it's not.
Yeah, which is crazy.
Yeah, so I think people are, I think people, you got a lot out of him last year, and I think he could produce this year. But if he's tight end 8 and you're drafting him as tight end 7, then you're not. It's a purgatory pick. It's nothing. There's no upside with him at all right now where he's going. And I think it's more likely than not that he regresses. So I don't know. Two guys. Just we're getting deep into the show here, but two guys, Nelson. How are you approaching right now, Deandre Hopkins with the suspension? Is he a value, or is he something to kind of maybe you're avoiding? And then Michael Thomas as well, with all the question marks up in the air.
I don't think the Hopkins price has corrected itself enough. So I'm avoiding where he's going. At least in the NFFC, the drafts that I've been a part of, I haven't found, a point in the draft where I'm like, oh, here we go. Hopkins makes sense. I can eat those 6 weeks and come up with a plan where I've got, 3 really good wide receivers, or I've got a wide receiver that I like to take in the 9th, 10th round that can play in the meantime, and I'll just take Hopkins here. I haven't found that yet, but I'll probably at some point be interested in him. Just again,
where is he going in those drafts? Because FFPC right now he's going like just your regular best ball. He's going like in the 8th round. Hopkins.
Yeah, he's going like, I think people are just. They've run out of. It's almost like they run out of names, and they see Hopkins sitting there, and just based on the name value, and it's kind of like the whole age, the struggle, in production last year, and then the suspension just kind of goes out the window, and they're just, oh, it's DeAndre Hopkins. He's still here in the 6th round. Let me take him. So that's about where he's going right now.
For me, it's a little bit easier to take him in a best ball than a managed league, but having dead weight sitting on your roster for 6 weeks, when you're talking about a 13, 14 week season, depending on your what site you're playing on, that's half the regular season. I mean, you're trying to get yourself into the championship round, and when you don't have one of your mid-round wide receivers to help you out with that, and you're just having to sit there and hold them, and buys have already started and everything else, it just gets really tough. I mean, on FFBC, Adam Thielen is going behind him.
I was just going to do a quick OTC. I was going to ask about Thielen versus Hopkins for Nelson.
That just depends on the structure of my team. Yeah. Like, do I need Thielen? Because Thielen is like the type of like nice little player. He's reached a point in his career where he's going, he's never going to be like a home run pick. Where
he's a floor play more than
like there's no upside there. I feel like, but
what if you put him against the 2 rookies, London or Burke? They have that, like, on the back end of the season, you're probably going to get the most out of them.
Sorry, JD, I'm an upside guy, so to me, I'm okay with the low floor. So I'm going to be interested in London, Burks, okay. Olav, those rookies, and I'll just sit them on my bench until they figure things out, and then kind of like Amon-Ra St. Brown, where to end the year, they're a fixture in the lineup.
Yeah. How about Hopkins or Elijah Moore?
Elijah Moore.
Okay, Hopkins or Hunter Renfrow?
At that point, I take Hopkins. That's another example, like Renfrow, like nice little player, nothing against them, but you got Adams there now and Waller. Renfro's not my type of player. Like he's just, you're never going to see him on my teams. Doesn't fit the profile.
Gotcha.
How about, a larger question? Nelson, you play a lot of major tournaments. You play a lot of the online championship. You play the Classic. You play the Prime Time, although the Classic is not really a tournament this year anymore. But what's your thoughts on correlation and stacking in major tournaments? And what mistakes do you see players making in trying to do so?
Especially with week 17. Throw the week 17 thing in there. I want to hear about
that. What about week 17?
Well, sorry, just answer Theo's question, but I want to bring the conversation. Yeah, that's the next question.
It's more best volley on.
I want to ask him after, just strategy wise, but answer Theo's question first.
Yeah. I prefer to stack, so I don't necessarily force the issue. I just, when my draft is going on, and let's say I take Cooper Kupp in the 1st round, and then I end up with Mike Evans in the 3rd round, let's say. At that point, I circle Brady and Stafford as, options. Maybe I go and draft, a running back in the 1st round, and I'm in the back half and I take like Diggs. Josh Allen at that point in the 3rd, 4th round, I start already contemplating, okay, is this the team that I'm going to fire up Allen so that I can stack him with Diggs? Another example would be, in the later rounds, the 5th round, let's say Cortland Sutton, who I'm high on this year. I end up getting him. Now Russell Wilson, comes into play. So I'm very much aware in drafts of who I've got at wide receiver or even tight end, and I am looking to to stack, and then finding that second wide receiver in the offense is definitely a viable strategy that I'm into. So where guys make mistakes, I don't know. I think where you make a mistake is if like you try to force it when there's like a no-brainer, player on the board. I guess would be the only mistake that it's a strategy that I follow.
Do you ever reach? Like, is there ever an option where you're like, I'm going to take this guy a half round or maybe a round earlier because I don't think he makes it back to me and I really want him for this build?
Usually,
asking for a friend, by the way, not from me.
Usually, sure.
JD never reaches.
He never reaches. Got it.
Hashtag always be stacking, baby.
Yeah, I mean, at quarterback, like last year, if I ended up with a ton of Godwin and Antonio Brown on teams, and like Brady, I was definitely, looking to get him, but early on, I was just taking him the value that he was in these drafts, but as it got closer to the season, and I think guys started figuring it out, and Brady moved up. I moved him up to make sure that I got him on teams based on how I built them. So that would be like an example from last season. This year, it's the same thing. Like I just did an online championship over the weekend, and I want to say it was a Cooper Cup team, actually, I think. And Stafford was definitely part of the strategy. He ended up going, but I had Sutton on the team, so I ended up with Russell Wilson on the team. So, yeah, I'm always looking to put that together.
Are you combining the stacking with also looking at the schedules for like the money weeks?
Yeah, if I'm doing like underdog, I think that's more viable in best ball, where you can't really, once the team's drafted, you can't change anything about the team. I think that's where you need to try to correlate and have, a stack with, to end the season, in week 17. I don't know if that was JD's question, but I'd be looking at week 17 and saying, okay, this is my major stack that I have, and I want to have, this quarterback or this running back or wide receiver in that same game, and I want that game to just go bananas and have those players scoring points for me. So I think it's works better in like a underdog type of format.
The challenge I was having with that, Nelson, the reason I asked is I feel like you get to a point, and you mentioned, I think, like, you're sitting there and there's a serious value that fell, but then you're looking for that correlation. And I find it easy to miss the values that are there in a piece that maybe doesn't fit, with anyone that you've drafted, whatever position it is that you're trying to relate. But I feel that if it's easy to go too far on one side and one strategy, and then you're just looking for like the Bills, and the Bengals, and like, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish at the end of the year, Denver, KC, and maybe you're missing some values. So there's kind of that fine line that you have to balance.
I'll give you an example. Like let's say you start off with Diggs and then you take Josh Allen, right? And now it presents itself where you're later in the draft and Gabe Davis is available, but you tend to like Darnell Mooney maybe a smidge more than Davis, but it's an Allen Diggs team. I'm taking Davis. That would be like the tiebreaker. So I could kind of complete that whole stack.
Okay. So it's got to be close still.
Yeah.
Okay. I like the example, by the way. I had something like that earlier.
Yeah. I don't want to, I don't want to just go and take Gabe. You know, I would have to just
like you're not taking Gabe Davis over I don't know, let's say like, you know, Elijah Mitchell type of thing, just to get your stack done, or someone who's like 2 rounds earlier, or you round and a half, or whatever it is, you know.
Well, Elijah Mitchell would be a bad example because Elijah Mitchell's
Gabe has jumped him in.
Everybody
I'm looking at these. I know I'm looking at best ball ADP. Sorry, guys.
No. But like an example would be like if you punted your RB2 and the guys we talked about, Miles Sanders and CEH are there, and let's say you're high on those guys and you think they make sense for how you built the team. Well, Gabe Davis makes sense too, but are you going to take Gabe Davis over one of those guys to put in as your RB2? That's where I think, you know, you can get carried away with stacks and then screw up the structure of your team.
That's where the mistakes are made.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that people get reaching to complete a stack, you know, overreaching just to force that stack. I think that's a big mistake people make. I think another mistake people make is, you know, when you're playing in the football guys, you're going up against, you know, a B Bagbatoba who's going to have almost max entries. You know, you don't want to have the most common stack. If you're going up against Billy Wazowski or Nelson Sousa in the RotoWire Online Championship, you don't want to have just this one stack. You want to be open to maybe a less common stack that might play out for you. I think that's one that, you know, a couple years back, you know, the Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs stack turned out to be a really big one for the players who took chances on that, but it was an uncommon stack as well. So, and I think last year you know, we saw the Bengals stack, you know, crushing, you know, in week 17, where that was maybe a less common stack. So I think people need to open up their you know, horizons on not necessarily doing exactly what everybody's doing when it comes to stacks as well.
That Rodgers Tanyan stack, baby.
that one Monday Night Football, you got a 3-touchdown game out of Tanyan, man.
There you go.
Hey, people forget how good he was, and you know, talk about narrow targetry is definitely happening in Green Bay. Anything else for Nelson, guys? We're over $130, and the man's been more than generous. Any last questions before we wrap this baby up?
How well are we going to
get to $130 already?
Exactly right,
man.
Just the fire content. You bring in the guest, the great guests, and time flies. And yeah, this was awesome. We really appreciate your time, Nelson. This was a really good one.
Yeah, no, I always enjoy my time with you guys.
Yeah, man. Tonight was another big show, guys. Check out Nelson Sousa. What is it? At the franchise
_12.
_12. I never know if it's underscore or just 12. But check him out. Also at FTN Fantasy. Nelson just dropped, like we talked about, his fade list. He's got some RB targets. Just dropping goodness, guys. A man who's done it himself and is willing to share the secrets for a very, very small and valid fee out there at FTN Fantasy. Nelson, always a blast having you on the district. Theo and Dan, you guys are crushing life. Always love hanging out with you guys and interrupting the regular life with all the goodness we get to discuss on the show. Guys, in the chat, you guys are fire tonight. We appreciate all you guys for hanging out. We missed our boy Wheeler, but we had 1912 in there, our boy Jay, and a bunch of others. Keep jumping in, guys. Bring the questions, bring the goodness. Theo, we have a couple more heaters coming this month. Why don't you let the people know? So
we have this Thursday night, we have John Daigle, 4for4, who's been on the Goat District a number of times before. He's a great guest. You know, Weekend Galaxy Brain Week 17, best ball with him for a while, JD. You'll love that.
Yes.
And then we have Ian Harditz coming on Friday. We're doing a daytime episode with him. And then Monday we have Jared Smola of Draft Sharks, who does some of the best projections around. And he's a super, super sharp guy. We always have good shows with him. So we got a number of great shows coming up in the district. And we're going to, you know, have an awesome June and awesome July. We're also drafting. We're going to do some ball-in episodes. You know, all of us are drafting. We'll do some live drafts and some draft review shows as well.
Totally, man. The GOATness is going to keep coming, guys. Make sure you subscribe, you smash the like, stick with us. Guys, the code district at Underdog Fantasy. We talked about all the goodness they have there. myffpc.com. Again, ton of goodness, guys. Go out there. If you're not already signed up, tag one of us. We'll hook you guys up. Viridian Global is where we get all our GOAT gear and all our fantasy gear. Go check them out, viridianglobal.com. Guys, we appreciate you guys. Now you can also see us on Spotify right now, YouTube, Spotify, and a bunch of podcast platforms. We appreciate all you guys. We appreciate Nelson. And guys, we'll check you all later.
GOAT District, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offers the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden, they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man. Y'all know what to do. It's a... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.